Welcome to the video, guys. I'm going to take this hub locker off, which is aftermarket, and then we'll get into the specifics on the job. There you go. You need one of these tools. Then pull out you got a sandwich. It's round, hex, and then round. Round. So there you go. Yeah, buddy. Right here, you guys are going to want to use a chrome socket. I use a 12-point. I don't have any 6-point sockets that can fit in that space. It's a very small clearance between some of the components in there. I think it's the seal, dust shroud of the seal, and the nut, or it's a nut actually. But you don't have any room there if you use an impact socket, so you'll have to end up using a manual tool to get these off, unless you have thin wall impact sockets. You guys are going to want to leave these nuts on and just loosen them up a couple cranks, and then you'll have to use that nut while it's still mounted onto the bearing as a way of striking the back of the bearing and getting it to come off. You're not going to separate the bearing with a chisel. That's borderline impossible. You put something on this nut back here and you strike it. You put the socket over top of it. These are all coming out with the stud. This can be a very difficult task if you don't know the right method. I've always used an indexing head pry bar ever since I got it. You could also use 2 pry bars, one on each side, standard type pry bars, and that will work as well. First the top. There we go. Got it. I'd like to pause here and tell you guys that I was not able to break the one on the other side loose. I had to torch it for like 3 minutes before it would come loose. So if you don't have a torch, you could be in for some trouble. This needs to come off. Don't lose these. If you lose the new one, you need an old one to put on. Are getting your parts from, but the grease fittings that came with these only are partly threaded. Resistance was too great for it to be installed. It didn't have threads. Obviously, the ball joint was far greater quality than the bleeder or the grease fitting. So the grease fitting broke off in here, and when I took my right angle drill, there was not enough room inside here for a regular length drill, so I had to go in slightly at an angle. I had another bleeder here. It was even the same thread, but it will not thread in here. Now I need a 1/4-28 tap. So if you're in this situation, I would just put an ordinary bleeder on there instead of the crappy ones that come in the kit from Napa. I don't know why they're using such a bad bleeder. I went ahead and greased up these the grease zerks, and then when you take the knuckle, you know, you have to put it up, and then I just started the top nut. Once I had the top nut started, I started the bottom nut. Yep, turns freely inside there. So tighten up this top bolt, and then the bottom ball joint will grab on enough to where the center shank isn't spinning. go. There you go. That's it. I've never seen a mating surface so pockmarked and rusty and crusty and horrible as this truck. I don't know what went on with this truck before I had it, but I wanted that surface to mate properly because since the hub is vacuum actuated, I wasn't sure if that mating surface would have an effect on the vacuum transfer to the hub. I didn't want to take a chance. Obviously, if it looks all bumpy, it's not going to mate on there perfectly well, so you want to do a better job. Get it real nice before you send it. I won't go into a ton of detail on the axle, but basically you're going to need a new seal a lot of the time. When you do ball joints, a lot of the time the seal is going to be awful and it's going to be destroyed and falling apart and not sealing. Or the previous person might have tried to put two seals in the space of one. I don't know what happened here, but it's not good. So, new seal. This is a vacuum seal, but it also centers the axle inside of the hub. So you want this to be right because there will be noise that comes from this axle flopping around. The proper way I install this, there's a tool for this, but you don't have to get it. You can just use, I believe this is considered a 4-inch flange. It's 1 1/4 pipe. And so you get a piece of 1 1/4 pipe and then a cap, pipe cap. And then this is a tool that you can strike with. Right here, I'm making sure that the axle is actually going into the differential gear and it's not crashing into the splines. You're looking for when this dust seal right here looks like it's touching, making contact. That's right in the area you want to be as far as depth. When the bearing can go on, you want to make sure everything in here is nice and clean. You don't want this to fail early. The bearing will press this in, but you really don't want to go that route. I'm not really sure all the reasons why, but it's not ideal. It's much better to have that tool. It doesn't cost much. Oh, I bless the name of God. This is why you save parts when you do a job and you pull a good part off a truck, because it comes with a new part in the kit. Save the old parts. I took this truck apart. Some of the work was not done correctly. The thrust washer was not present on this side. The installation was incomplete. Things were wrong. But I had this thrust washer in my box. I'm so happy I had it. So happy. Carefully place the destroyed shroud back onto your truck, guys. This wire goes through the shroud. If you install this outside, you'll be damaging the shroud to install it afterwards. So, oops. So put it in there now before you tighten everything down. You need a bar to line up this center spindle on the axle with the gear around it, because it's not going to be perfectly centered until that hub locker assembly is inside there, keeping it more straight. So put this behind, gives you a little bit of jiggle. Just enough to move that a tiny bit is all you need. You need your 3 washers. It's a round, hex, and then round. I'm cleaning these off. I don't want them grimy. If they grind when you spin them together, then they're not clean enough. You want inside there to be clean too. Then just a little grease on all of these, something like that, just to film. They don't need to be all gooped up with grease. It's just gonna cause dirt accumulation anyways. Put those in. Inside here, this axle needs to come out. If the axle's too far that way, then the spring clip won't go on. Previous people didn't have this clip into the groove. The axle could move out an inch, in and out like that, and it used to make noise. So we're gonna use our adjusting head pry bar to pull the axle outwards this way, just enough to get that clip on. So what I'll do is start this clip on the shaft, and I'll slide it down. Actually, I think I got it. When I put forward pressure this way, it relieves that spring clip. But when I release it, the spring clip is tight. So that's how I know it's in the groove, and you can see it. I'm sure you can see the spring clip right there, and I'm not gonna do it on camera here, but poke something in that hole and try to spin it, and then try to spin it while there's a pry bar behind this yoke, and the pry bar can pull this yoke that direction a little bit, and that'll tell you everything you need, because if it relieves this, then you know you're in your slot and you're just tight, and you want it a little snug anyways. And I'm gonna install my worn kit back, but I'm planning on replacing this with a vacuum style kit. Looks like it's rotor time. I put a lug nut to hold the rotor in place. Don't forget it when you install the tire. We install this little 8mm. This is a special bolt. It's got a little shoulder piece on it for keeping this from being overly tight against the plastic. If you lose, you can still use a basic bolt to replace it. You would run into small difficulties later taking it apart. Remember, easiest way to put the caliper on is with the wheel turned the opposite side. This wire goes along here, so this push popper goes in on the frame, and then you just follow back to the nearest rubber. Sometimes these don't line up. There's my vacuum. Not that that's gonna have an effect right now, but for the future I'll hook it up. We'll have to put a new vacuum line on here too, but just to get it close, I'll put that on there. All right, plug this in. If you break your clip-ons like me, then you can use a zip tie, but this piece, there's actually 2 holes in the shroud for this. So if they're still, the push poppers are still on the bracket, then you can shove them in there. There we go. But even if that popper is not there, you can zip tie to that hole. If the joint is moving internally, you might not be able to get this nut to go on. So you'll just, usually you can tap it or force it down. I'll start my castle nut. I already know it's rotating internally because it did that when I took it apart, but just for fun I could try to tighten it.
Now, just because it's rotating internally doesn't mean it's bad, okay? Some people say that, but that joint just has freedom of movement. So we need to get that taper to push down. So we'll just use the gentle art of persuasion on this thing. I don't think that's going to hurt it. If it does, then you need the steering. And then hopefully we can turn this now. Oh. Yep, it goes on. So there you go. Better now. It's way better now. Whoa, so much better now. It does drive down the road center. That's the gist of the job, guys. Basically, when you get done, you know, you need to make sure all your brakes are attached properly, make sure your wires are out of the way and that they're connected. Double check, make sure all your hardware is used. You know, when you pull the thing apart, make sure that you keep track of each item of hardware that you took off. And then obviously if there's something different from one side to another, you know that there might have been some bad work done. You want both sides to be the same, so if you're gonna do this job, you should do both sides. I also did my axle vacuum seals, but the reason I probably didn't need those, but I wanna switch to the old vacuum system and get rid of these Warren lockers that don't really work right and all the bolts got stripped on them, and put the original vacuum style lockers in. I found them on eBay for a good price, and that vacuum seal is also kind of a centering bearing as well. Just try not to damage the tie rod ends. Tie rods on this is another, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to replace. It's easy to replace, and you can measure it with a tape measure and just sort of make it the same, and then your alignment won't need to get done. But I didn't really want to spend that kind of money on it right now. I was just trying to get the truck to stop driving to one side. I discovered that there's a little a sleeve, you know, an adjustment sleeve where the top ball joint goes in, and that one can adjust all the different, you know, it'll tilt the wheel out this way, that way, or it'll tilt the knuckle effectively, will tilt the hub forward or backward. And that one was tilted. I adjusted it to what seemed like a neutral center position, and the truck isn't driving to the side a lot. It's driving to the side a little bit now. But I'm not really sure what to do about that, so I'll just probably keep driving it for now, and hopefully I'll hunt down the problem later. Maybe there'll be a shop that knows how to get the proper adjustment out of that sleeve, and I'll be able to just pay to get an alignment done. But the thing is, usually when you go to get one of these trucks aligned, all they're doing is pretty much toe in, and if that doesn't work, then you're out of luck. There's also an adjustable traction bar on this truck, and the track bar basically holds the axle from moving left to right while you're driving. And so technically, I guess, if the axle is shifted over, it can kind of steer you, but I don't know if it's really steering so much as dog tracking. And I don't know if dog tracking steers you either. It might affect the alignment due to the fact of the back end of the truck trying to drive past the front end. But I'll figure all that stuff out in the future. But that's how you do the ball joint job, guys. I hope you guys have good success. Don't lose your temper with this. Be patient, be careful. The bearings are not super hard to remove if you do the process that I showed you. If you don't have big sockets and an impact, you're gonna be frustrated for sure on this job. You're gonna need, I believe it was a 33mm socket, a 32mm socket, long handled, you know, 1/2-inch breaker bar. Like I said, the impact is good, but use the same socket to take off the lug nuts as you do the tie rod end nut on the driver's side, and the brake caliper bolts, the big bolts. You don't have to take the brake calipers apart. You can just keep them all together as one unit, and as long as you open up that caliper just a tiny bit with a screwdriver before you take it off, you should be able to get that right back on with no problem. Yeah, I don't know what else. It's not that complicated of a job, but you do need that ball joint press. And if you don't have the ball joint press, I'm very sorry, I don't know what to tell you. You need the ball joint press. You're not gonna get those out without a ball joint press. And if you do, it's gonna be a very painful process for you. And then the install is also gonna be extremely difficult. And I don't see why you would go through that when you could just, you know, do it the easy way, and you could rent a ball joint press from the auto parts store. So that's probably the way to go about it if you don't own one. And they have a lot of those big sockets you can rent too, but you'll need to know exactly what size and stuff, so it's a lot of trouble if they're far away. I don't know what else to say except good luck on your ball joint job, guys. It's not the easiest job in the world. Once you know how to do it, and once you've done it a couple times, it's not too bad. Have a great day.